Once again, a big thanks to Ian Wishart and welcome back to The Beat Goes On. And before we talk to our special guest, we have winners to announce from previous shows. First of all, 3 packets of sleep in the Snail's Mail competition for June. From the draw, Jay Stevenson, Mangatoroto, Neil Armand in Blenheim, and Sharon Montgomery from Nelson. And we also have 3 winners of the brand new book by Max Cryer called Every Dog Has Its Day. From the draw, Lindsay and Joanne in Albany, Robin Cameron in Kaikoura, and Frank Bale from Mount Wellington. Congratulations to our 6 winners, and stand by your letterboxes. And right now it's time for that time when we talk to our special guest. Tonight's special guest is Dermott Malley. Dermott was the final owner of the newspaper The Truth. For 115 years, The Truth was the champion of the little guy. They would go into battle for you. But times have changed. The world has gone digital, and The Truth has finally closed its doors. We welcome Dermott Malley as our special guest on The Beat Goes On. A big welcome to the program to Dermott Malley.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you, Dermott. Good Irish name there.
It is indeed, yes.
Now, you did tell me before we sat down to talk that you arrived in New Zealand when you were 20.
In my 20s, yes.
20.
I'd studied agriculture and farmed in Ireland, and then I came out to New Zealand, actually to study at Lincoln University.
That makes you a good baby boomer, doesn't it? What year can we put down for Dermott Malley being entering the world?
1951.
1951, wow. Great year. Classic baby boomer there, Dermott. But of course, in the end, you ended up being an orchardist, Dermott. How did that happen?
Well, I've always been interested in the land, and my wife and I decided to go back apple farming in the Hawke's Bay, and then more recently we've moved to doing kiwi fruit and avocados in Northland. And
you've been hit by a terrible, well, it's the equivalent of foot and mouth disease for everybody else, isn't it? This PSA with kiwi fruit.
PSAV has been an incredibly devastating disease. I don't think people realise how well New Zealand has managed to handle it. It should never have been here. It is here, but people have got on, and Zespri and others have got behind making positive changes to fix the problem.
Yeah,
we're really lucky, we're in Whangarei, so we're really lucky. We're one of the last 3 areas in New Zealand that are currently in exclusion zone. We don't have it, or we believe we don't have it as.
Well, that's a fascinating story in itself, and we could talk for hours on that one. But we're here today because at some stage you decided that you were going to have a go at running The Truth, a newspaper which us baby boomers grew up with. It was in our lives.
It's been a big part of New Zealand. I mean, and it's in its heydays, it sold 250,000 copies a week, which is really a hard number to think about.
And my mother said I was never to read it because she didn't want to taint Gerard Smith's purity of life, you see. So
she didn't want you to read about the divorces and scandals and other things.
So it's had a proud 115-year history, and it's been laid to rest this week, hasn't it?
It has indeed. I think it's probably had a 115-year history. Some of it has probably been less proud than other parts of it. But in going back and looking at the library, which we have of bound copies of The Truth going back to the 30s and since the 30s, I mean, it's covered everything in New Zealand.
Was it worth saving? Was it worth saving?
Oh, absolutely. I'd had some experience for a brief while. I'd owned the New Zealand Gardener, which I then sold on to INL. So I'd had some publishing experience, and we thought that we could take Truth back to its
glory days.
It proved too big a battle, and we made a final attempt again this year, and it just proved one hill too many.
What do you think killed The Truth? In a nutshell.
I think there has been it didn't continue to gain a younger audience who have moved probably to different media. So it was I don't think there is a newspaper that has learnt how to make the internet pay, and the smaller newspapers, that's even harder. The bigger newspapers, they've got a lot of resource, they run big sites, Some of them will maybe move behind paywalls.
Rugby, racing and beer. It was a man's paper, wasn't it?
Yes.
Racing's suffered losses too, hasn't it?
Racing has suffered huge losses.
And today, of course, the wine industry is cut into the beer consumption. And I suppose rugby's the only winner out of those three, rugby, racing and beer, that's still going strong.
I mean, it's a real backbone of our culture, so
Yeah.
yes, it has. I mean, racing had huge number of publications. I mean, you had Friday Flash and a vast number of publications that were almost devoted totally to horse racing, and it sort of slid away into oblivion.
Now, one of the great strengths of The Truth was, and this is why my mum didn't want me to read it, was it was all about scandal and divorce. Yeah,
The paper made a name reporting the other party. I mean, it was really an outing exercise, almost as much as the gay world went through an outing exercise. There was an outing exercise for people who were having affairs, and it used the photographic evidence of that as a big part of its splash.
And you couldn't get that information anywhere else. The Herald and the upright newspapers.
No, they didn't want to print that.
They didn't want to print
No,
that.
they didn't want to print that. I think they were probably frightened they might have been printed about themselves.
Now, it's 2007, Dermott. It's 6 years ago, and you became aware that The Truth was able to be purchased. And
I did.
What gave you the feeling that you could do something for The Truth?
I think we looked at the opportunity of going back to its roots and trying to turn it around. What we were unaware of is how ingrained it had become in the adult industry and the difficulty of making any change that caused.
Explain that further. The adult industry being
the sex industry essentially had dominated its advertising revenue by the time that Fairfax sold it, and it just became too difficult to change. And then over the following years, interestingly for New Zealand, the adult industry had a recession too.
Well, you must have given it a good go, because you did go into it, not just yourself, Dermott, but you went in with Matthew Horton, whose father ran the Herald for how many years?
Well,
the Horton
yes,
family, wasn't it?
Part of
so. Here was all the expertise of the Hortons plus your expertise, and it was still difficult to make a go of it.
Yes, I think the circumstances were such that it limited what we could do. It wasn't a matter of willingness or effort or time that was put into it. There was a lot of that. It just became a step too far.
Now, personally, are you going to miss it? The hurly-burly of the newspaper world? You're back to Whangarei and kiwi fruit farming?
I'm rather enjoying kiwi fruit farming at the moment.
So there's no other newspapers out there that you'd want?
Not on the current horizon.
You want to support?
No.
Well, Dermott, thanks for coming in today and telling us all about The Truth and its final days. But it has been a long, slow decline, hasn't it?
It has
I mean,
indeed,
it just
yes.
hasn't happened overnight.
No, it was a slow decline.
Yeah.
And made faster by the changes in electronic news and the way in which we deal with things nowadays.
How do you personally feel? Sad that it's...
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, the staff ceased to have, who'd been very loyal, who'd done a wonderful job for the paper. So yes, any company closing is always sad.
So it's back to kiwi fruit farming and keeping that PSA out.
Absolutely.
That's the next battle, isn't it? So,
that is, yes, that's a big battle.
So the two big battles in your life was keeping The Truth going and keeping PSA out. So
it is now.
It's an exciting life.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in today.
Nice to meet you.
And once again, as I said earlier on, it's another symbol of the baby boomer generation leaving us, and makes us all actually think twice about what's happening out there.
A recognition of changing times.
Yes. Thanks, Dermott. Thank you, Dermott. The Beat Goes On. We'll be back after the break with Kennedy Garland, Ian Wishart, and CNN interviewer Larry King.